earlier said that PHP is hypertext preprocessor and it's a server-side scripting language that can either be embedded in an HTML document or it can be used as a standalone back-end code. I say server-side means that this code does most of the server-side work. If you have to recall what we had as our plan to this course, we had something of this sort. Mm, Miro. Okay. So as our whiteboard loads, this is what we had talked about earlier. We had said that we'll have the front end, and the front end is what you see on right on your computer of the website. Let's say sportscope.com. But what is ideally happening, we said there is what we call a back end, and this back end, its main purpose is to ensure that it creates all the logic that is required to feed data into what we see. The process of feeding data, this comes in as an API, which is the programming interface of this application, and this will communicate to this by being sanitized by what we call a middleware, and the back end is what we call a controller, and a controller would communicate with a database where data is saved in its proper proportions in a database like MySQL. The files that save to the database and retrieve to the database is what we call model files. So these are called models. So what everything we've been looking at from Bootstrap, HTML, CSS, it has been front end. And now we are starting to shift to PHP in the back end and how it manages to punch data into this. And then we shall look at the database, and that would be a full stack web application. PHP is going to be wide because it has frameworks that we shall look at a later stage, like Laravel, Clean, etc. An API can also be an external one that is, let's say, a Google Cloud API that brings in its data to us, and then the controller sorts the way we get to manage it. The very good example of this is if you're trying to log into a page and that page requires you to sign in with Google. We get to communicate with some controller externally that gives us data as an API output, let's say JSON, and then this controller will know how to manage it for the front end to understand it. With those few remarks, allow me to now get into PHP. So we have two things, as I said in the earlier class. We have echo and then print. Echo is the most popular one because it prints everything in the browser, but print is pretty much faster because it prints in the terminal or it prints in the console and also in the browser, but it's much more faster. It's not for the browser, but it prints too. When you're to add PHP within an HTML document, you would have to first open a PHP tag just like any other PHP tag is opened, and then you get to close it with the same question mark and the closing tag. And in between, when you add anything to do with PHP here, it will be rendered as long as that file is saved as a .php and not a .html. To declare variables in PHP, we had earlier said that we use a dollar mark, and as long as you place it in front of anything, PHP will define that as a variable. While writing a variable, the correct syntax is that you write a small letter and then an uppercase. Just a minute, please, just a minute. All right, sorry about that. So I was saying that just like we had said in our earlier class, when you write a variable name, you start with a lower case and then the second one starts with an uppercase. This will be very important when we are adding methods to the functions in PHP. In PHP, we have strings, we can have booleans, we can have integers, we can have floating point numbers, we can have nav values, and then we can also define anything at the top of a file using the declare function, as we are about to see. And then I was saying that in the when we're using object-oriented programming language, when you have a function, you need to define the data type in which you're passing this data by saying string, and then you get to declare the string that is in there, which is Uganda. And you can see this string has 6 letters, and that's why we add 6 here to output the string as is. We can also uh, have to declare integer with int. We can have to declare a floating point number by saying float. We can have to declare a boolean by saying bool. We can declare a null value by saying null, and then an array by saying array. One thing that you would need to know about arrays is that when we are counting arrays, we start the very first number in an array is index 0, and then we start counting 1, 2, 3. We don't count the positions in PHP or any other object-oriented programming languages when we are indexing from the value 1. We index from the value 0 onwards. We shall look at arrays and different kind of arrays, for example, associative arrays and so on and so forth. Now we can get to manipulate strings in so many ways and even beyond strings with what we call typecasting. For example, if we had a variable that this the variable we call it goes, just a minute. Hello? Hello. My day was okay. How was yours? Yeah, Carol, I'm still in a meeting right now. Okay. Yeah. When you have a variable like let's say goals, which is a string 5 goals, you can be able to manipulate this number 5 that is under a string by just declaring another variable number, and then you call out the integer in it by saying int, then the previous variable which was goals, and this will print 5 because there's 5 in there. But if there's no integer into that string, then it would cause an error. Also, since this is a number, it can also be defined as a floating point number. So if you have a variable and you call the previous string by saying it should be a float, then you should output it as a float. We can do the same for numbers. If you have an integer which is 42 and you want to convert it into a string, then you would have a string 42, a string 5, a string whatever has been defined here. Another thing we can play around is we can play around booleans and strings. If you said your variable is a boolean and an empty string, then this should give you a false. Why should this be a false? It should be a false because this string is empty. Whereas if you entered anything into the string, even if it's the very value called false, it will give you true because this string is not empty. So you're using a boolean to manipulate a string. In PHP, just like in JavaScript, as we saw in the current um, in the precurrent ones, we have what we call we have what we call constants. You can get to define a constant by saying define, and then you add the two parameters or even more of what you're trying to define. And this will be considered as constants at runtime. This is very, very, very important when we are working around PDO and we're connecting to the database. You see, in PHP, if I'm to open for you our if I'm to open for you our project and how far it has come to this very point of this class, we get to have a .m file where we define the different aspects of the application. For example, the host name, which is localhost, or 127.0.0.1. That is the default IP address for localhost. And then you can get to define the database name, the database user, and then the password. Often in such circumstances, if you want this to be included and defined as constants on a particular PHP file, then you get to say define, and then you define them by saying db host, which was defined elsewhere, and then this db host is attributed to localhost. This definition would mean that every single time we call upon db host as a constant, it will always be localhost. So define is a good way to define constants. But another thing you need to know about constants is that constants do not need the dollar mark on them. You can just say constant and then you mention the constant name, maximum commentary to be 500. And at compile time, this maximum commentary will always be 500. And this is very key to be used in classes. Classes are more like functions. We call them classes. Um, Another thing that we need is we can always echo a constant. When you echo a constant, it means that you've defined a constant, and as you can see, we've not added a dollar mark here, which means that app name will always be that constant. These are the three different ways in which, four actually, that we can, there are actually three, there are three ways we can declare constants. You can either define them. When you define them, that means the first quotation mark is the variable of that constant, and the second one is the value. We can say const, just like we did in JavaScript, where you define your constant and then that constant you give it a value. One thing you're going to discover in the JavaScript syntax is that when it comes to constant, they're always in uppercase and always separated by an underscore. You should always keep that as gospel truth, and you shouldn't ask very many questions. Now, if you've done Excel, you would think that it's very hard to do operations on strings, but if you've looked at our class of JavaScript, you should know that strings also go through additional operations, as we're about to see. Back to our project. If this is our file structure, as you can see it, we always have a .m file where we get to define the different things the um, like the app name. And it's not by mistake that these things it's not by definition that these things are written in uppercase. So if we are to say this, that our db host is always going to be 127.0.0.1, 1.0.0.0.1, I want you to take it from me that is always the default IP address for localhost, aren't you? Mpuze. Just a minute. Seriously, it's very easy people to know that your words are AI because they are poetic. Poetry. AI is poetic. You just need to be natural. Ekifaananyi oba kyeyakoleraku kiteekayo ekyo kankisomemu kale nze nkiteekeyo ojja funako whatever you're carrying today you don't have to carry it alone. Be still and know he is God. Okay, hurry up. Nassim is waiting on call. He's live with me. As you get the image, let me first continue with my class. So when we define things like DB host is this, and then we say DB user in our .m file is, let's say our user of this database is, let's say the user, when we get to databases, you will understand what DB host is, database user, database passwords. So let's just understand the constants for at this point. So if we say database user is, let's say DB Barak, this is the user of this password, and then their password is, let's say 1 2 3 4 5. Chinyonyeze mu file manager. 1 2 3 4 5. So if you are going to use this in, let's say, under controllers, and under controllers we have a new file that we can call, let's say users.php, and maybe this is the file that controls users. You can say define, and then under define kinyonyeze mu file manager, mu app gye bayita file manager. Just a minute. Interesting sentiment. In the 2025, no sorting on done here once. I've done here once and they are go teaching. When you share, you may just send. That means you want teaching Tuesday. Is today Tuesday? Today is Tuesday. Is today Tuesday?
Yes.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Hey, non status.
Cosa quanti io?
Hey. Nedda. Era njateeka a Bible verse. Njateeka a Bible verse. I'm sorry. Jamutwala Bible kwa mujisoma tulisoma. Ninde gambuli nakwate kuye. Ffenna twaba ng'endiga buli omu ffenna akwate ku buli Mukama n'atuleka. obutali butuukirivu bwaffe ffenna envaasi engambye. See past days. I'm sorry, I'm going to rejoin you. Please stick online. Kubanga Katonda bwe yayagala ensi bw'atulema kale nammwe ebikolwa byammwe ebirungi byayo temumanyi nti mwe muli asooka ensere mu luzungu ekyo naive sijja malako n'oluganda. See past days. Don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple? The Lord is near to all who call on Him, to all who call on Him in truth. Yes. Oyo maama w'ono omwana. Miguel yabatwala.
waggulu.
Genze fukamira neebaza. Genda kunyumisa. Eremereddwa okufuna transport nange akajja. Afternoons essaawa ez'enterefa. By the way, okimanyi nti era ayagala nti abantu mbabiri nga babeerawo kiro. I'm back to you. I was saying, most times, in such cases, when you need those, you shall just have to say that DB name, no, caps, DB name, and then we attribute this DB name to anything like DB Barak. Oh, maybe the DB name is DB users, and then we terminate. Now this is not being defined properly because this file is, I don't have PHP installed, but I do have it. Let me just try to do something like this, PHP, so that highlights properly. We have just declared a constant, but we've said there's a separate way of doing this by just saying const, and then we say DB name is DB users. So this will always mean that DB users is the DB name. And then there is also the third way that we talked about is just by saying that let us echo DB name without that so-called without that so-called dollar symbol, and then we say DB users. And then we exterminate that. I don't know what I've done wrong with this echo, but it says there is an error under echo. So let me first see. I'm sorry. We just had to echo this up to the way here. Oh, sorry. So this would print out this to this. When we're echoing, instead of adding a dollar sign so that echo knows that we are calling upon a variable, it will not need because it's already declared as a constant. Then I had entered into stream operations where I said that in the earlier classes. All right, Nassim, I'm done with what I was doing. I'm sorry for delaying you in a bit, but we can proceed. It was just a minor thing, very, very minor thing. So I was saying earlier that we have string operations too in in PHP. If you had a variable that gives us a string Uganda cranes and would like to greet Uganda cranes at any single time, and we want to call upon the name of this team, then we would just write under double quotation marks. We can write welcome to, and then we call upon this string. Let us just try this maybe here. If you have something like, let's say, let me just make sure that Nassim, if you, let me send you a message. All right. So I was still saying from these notes that if you have any variable, let's say we say that company name is, let's say, Jakisa International. If we said that is our company name and we'd like to append the company name somewhere, and let's say we also have then let's say we have the company location giving us something like plot, the location which I'm in, plot 53, Arkwright City, plot 53, Arkwright City, Bwebaja, and Tebe Road. So if I want to say that I am from Jakisa International, located at that location, then I'll just create a new variable that I can call um, about me, and I say that about me is, then I say I am from, then I just call upon this company name within the string already. I am from that, located at, then I call upon this company location, and then I get to terminate. If I removed this and then I try to run this, you don't have an extension for the binding pin, you should, oh my G. PHP is installed, my god. Let us install something to debug PHP, but wait, I just wanted it to run in the terminal. Anyway, if we are to find a terminal here, let's say, there it is, perfect. And then we say, actually, we don't need this. If we are to wait for this terminal to run, perfect. And then I locate I tried to locate the location of users. So users is under app, and under app it's under controllers, and under controllers it's right there actually. And then I say PHP, and then I say users.php. Now that's slow. Uh, I really need that extension to debug. But this would output for us something like this. It would output I am from Jakisa International, located at this entire string here. I've brought in stuff that is not meant to come. This is what it will print. I forgot something. I think it was supposed to be echo. We just had to echo this. So we just say echo about me. That's all that was left of my code. No. So if I am to run this again, yes, that's it. It says I am Jakisa Daniel Barak, located at plot 53 Accra City, Bubaja, Entebbe Road. So ideally what we've done in PHP is that we have added a whole variable inside of a string and it really worked out, and we call that variable interpolation. However, we can do something a little bit different by adding it into a curly brace syntax. It's the same thing ideally, but it's, if we said another about me, maybe, equals to, and then we say I am from, then we use the curly brackets instead, and inside of the curly brackets they've told us that we add the entire tag, this, and then we say company name, and then we say at, oh sorry, located at, and then we say we bring in the curly brackets again, and then we say $sign company location. So if we are to echo another about me, and then we try to run this again in the terminal, it will bring a syntax error, unexpected token echo. Echo line 12. Let's do something like this. Let's try removing line 12, and let's try running it again. Unexpected error on line 14. So we are pretty much not so sure why. No. I know, yes, but no. So this is bringing a syntax error in the version of PHP that I have, and that would be ununderstandable to me at this very juncture. This didn't make sense to me. So they're saying that this curly brace syntax is more explicit. Well, one that I'm totally sure of is concatenation. So we don't need interpolation when we use single quotation marks. For example, instead of all this, if we just said that um, about me is simply a single quotation mark where we say I am from, and then outside of here you add a dot to concatenate this with, and then you say um, company location, and then you say representing, oh sorry, under a single quotation mark, and say representing, and then you say dot, and then you bring in another variable which is company name. So if we are to echo about me, if we are to echo this about me, what should we get? Echo, 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 echo. Perfect. And I think the error I got here, it was simply because maybe we didn't terminate. Yeah, honestly, maybe that's it. If we are to print out this, it would give us that I am from plot 53. We need to add these spaces at the very end to represent the space after the concatenation. Yes, that space is very, no, what did I just do? No. If I'm to come back here in the terminal and then I call this to run, it would say that I'm from plot 53 upright city Babaja Emerald representing that. So the curly braces, which is more explicit, would have worked as well, but I just forgot this trailing quotation mark to terminate that line. We also have what we call multi-line string interpolation, and I think this is where I ended in the very first recording. In this one, if you have a div just like this one, you can get to attribute it to a variable called at HTML. Then you add these. Thereby, if you have your different HTMLs and you want to punch into them the different things of the variables, let's say we earlier defined version, we earlier defined team, these things get to be available on multiple lines, but all embedded under a singular HTML, so that if you're to echo HTML, this entire HTML doc will print out directly. So let us look at the different operations that we have in PHP. We have arithmetic operations in PHP, and we can have a variable which is 2. Let's say we are defining variables. Home team is 2 and the away team is 2 and the score is 2-1. So if we try to echo home team plus the away team, which are both integers, then you must get the answer 3. If you try subtracting these two integers, you must get the difference 1. If you try to multiply the two, you must get the answer 2, which is 2 times 1. If you try dividing the 2, you must get the answer 2. And if you try to find the modulo, this means that if you're to divide these two numbers, what is the remainder? So we call that modulo. So if you introduce the percentage symbol between two values that you're trying to operate, then you would get the value of the remainder. We can test that out. If we have we can even, if we have 23 and then we say 23 modulo 3, and then we say, do we really need to echo after that such kind of a line? Let me come to terminal and I see if that would give us anything. It won't. So let's give it a variable. If we had a variable that is called operand equals to that, and then you try to um, echo OPR, you would most likely get 2, because when you get 23 and divide it by 3, the remainder is always 2. So the percentage symbol between any two integers or floating point numbers means modulo symbol. A minute, please, but please don't hang up on this call. Elijah, Mom is here for you. Mom is here. Can't believe. You forgot your name. So I'm in class. Yeah, I'm in class with Nasim. I hope he is not. Are you still with me, Nasim? Yeah, he's still online. Perfect. Um, I was talking about the different operands we have. We have the plus, we have the minus, we have the multiplication use an asterisk, we have the out of to mean division, we have this to mean modulo. But when you have the double state means to the power of, if you have anything like if you have 4 to the power of 3, if we echo our variable operand, we should be able to get 64 because 4 power 3 is 64. So that is also very important to know. Uh, yeah, this is the basics really. Then we have assignment. Some of the things that we can do as operations is assignment, but I think you're good at this stage. You know how to add, multiply, add, subtract, multiply, divide, modulo, and the power of in PHP. When it comes to assignment, you can always use an equal sign to loosely assign anything to anything. We shall soon look at the double equals and the triple equal signs and what they mean. But I think we had looked at this in JavaScript and you still recall. But the single equal sign just means that you're assigning a certain variable to a certain value. It's something that we've been doing on and on. So operand is whatever is in here. So every time we call upon operand, it should do whatever is going on under it. However, when we add a plus symbol ahead of it, it means that when you have a goes as 1, then you should add 1 on top of that. So this tends to 1. It means that if goes was 0, let's say operand is 20. So if that variable is 20 and then we create a new, uh, let's call it a value 1. If value 1, that's better, is 20, then the other one, if we say value 2, if we say value 2 is plus equals to, and then we say another 20 here, it would mean that no, that is completely bizarre. Bizarre. We just need to recall the same initial value 1. We need to call upon the initial value 1. So if we are to echo value 1, it would first internally run the value 1 at this stage. But as it proceeds in this file, it will see that on top of this, add another 20. And if we are to echo this in our terminal here, we shall get 14. So this means that instead of giving us the first value, first add something to it. There is something that you've seen a lot in JavaScript, and here it's called incremental. It means that if a certain value was available, then we should increase it by that exact value. So if we proceeded here and we said value, I'm busy. I'm busy. That's the truth. So if we said value 1 plus plus, and then we try to echo value 1 at this stage, boom, 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 boom. Pass error, syntax unexpected plus plus. Like seriously? Because plus plus means when we are doing something at an increasing level, it means that it should be defined. Oh, I know where my value. I had forgotten that very important dollar symbol. Minor mistakes. Yes, this should give us an increment of 1. So what PHP does, and what you'll always see in PHP, especially when you're debugging PHP, will join rating. But I can't leave this class. I've started late, and I have another class at 10. So one thing that you're going to see about then dedicated data to joining. One thing you'll learn about PHP is that it works on a linear basis. When it starts running, it starts with finding that value 1 has a value of 20. At this stage, we say that on top of 20, add another value of 20. It becomes 40. Then when we see plus plus, it means add a singular 1 value, and that makes it 41. Yeah, yes, that's what I told me yesterday. Mama, but I'm never. But I thought you would join. When today, Nijo Bamboo's restoration, I will join us shortly. When you didn't join, I think they can't tell you to come on because they know you. Mm-mm. Join in. Then hello, hello. Then another thing we have here is we can have a plus symbol before the variable. Now this is pre-increment. You see, in post increment earlier, a value had to first be what it's meant to be, then it's increased by one. Whereas if you add the values before it, thank you, Musumba, but it's correct with the phone. Goreti angambye leero yagenda okukumamu. So when we have a plus before the variable rate, then I can. If you have two plus symbols ahead of this variable, if we have two plus symbols ahead of a variable, then it's called pre-increment. It means that the value has to first be the former value before it becomes the new value. For example, if we said plus plus, then we say value 1 at this juncture. Then, if you can't do it, then this will become 42. It became 42 not because the two would bring in the same value, but it's because it first added a 1 before it brought in its own value. Yeah, it's okay. Maybe it's okay. Jetuli Msomba. So, Nasim, I'll have to first end this class at this junction. Then from here, we shall proceed until we finish the key principles of PHP, so that tomorrow we start applying these principles in practice. For now, I have a prayer session that is going to start, so I request to first end this class at this stage. In case of any questions, please post them on the chat. All right, I'm done with prayers. I don't know whether you're still there. If you're not there, then probably you would find this on the recording. Where was I? I was still talking about I was done with the arithmetic, and I was looking at assignment. I said if you add the double equal signs after a variable, it's post incremental. It first returns the value of the variable, then it adds a 1 to it. Whereas if you add them before it, which is rare, it will be rare, it first gets a 1 and then it tops up with the value of this. Often it would make more sense if let's say we had this turn to 2, then 2, 1 on top of 2 becoming 3, but yeah, that's the flow. Then if you have a minus in front of an equal sign, it would first deduct, it would get this value and then deduct a value of 1 on top of it, which we can illustrate here when we say, if we say value 1 and then we say minus equals this, I don't know why that's an error. Yeah, I don't know why that's an error. We always have to add a value after this operand. So if we are to deduct 20 here and then we try to run this, we get 22. It means it gets the value which was 42 and then it subtracts before it equals 2. It deducts 20 to get the new value of value 1. So if we print value 1, to deduct 20 from value 1 to this stage. Another thing that you would look at is called string concatenation assignment, whereby if you have a variable and then you say dot equals to, and then you add something on top of it, it would concatenate the value of name on top of this. So this you can always have maybe different team names like Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, and then you get a dot and then you add a string, and this string will be added on top of it. This can be illustrated here. If we say amount equals to dot equals to, and then we say value 1. Let me see if this would work honestly. This is not going to work. It's an error, but it's again another pass error as we've been doing earlier. So we get an operand and then we concatenate it with a string, and it would be assigned to that string as a wholesome reminder. I don't know why I'm doing so many errors today, but ideally what's on my notes is actually true. Now we have looked at exactly one kind of a comparison, which was assignment comparison, and it's this where we declared a variable and then we assign it to anything. But there are other comparisons we have in programming other than assignment, and the first one is the double equal sign. If we say 1 is double equal sign to the string 1. This is true because this is loose. It's not, it's looking at just the coercion, the type coercion. So whether it's a string or whether it's a numeral, whether it's a floating point number, as long as it's true in principle, then it will always be true. However, if you add a triple equal sign, then it's strict and there is no coercion at this point because it also takes the type of 1, compares it with the integer 1, and will tell you that is false. It cannot be strictly compared to each other. And when you add an exclamation, it creates something we say not. Not. So this is trying to say 1 is not equivalent to 1 as a string um, on a double equal sign. And this is true because these two are not equal. This is a string and this is an integer. So that would give us a true. And even if you did a non-triple equal sign, it would still be the same answer. Then we have what we call a spaceship equality. It looks like a spaceship. If we say 5 spaceship equality 3, it means spaceship negative 0 positive. So this gives us 1. This is sort of it's sort of complicated in this way. We are creating a number line where we have the negatives, the 0, and then the positives. So if you're to compare 5, it's more like 5 is a number that is between 5. That means it's less than 5 or equal to 5, but it's greater than 3, and that number would be 1. If you added 5 and 5, a number that is greater than 5, less than 5, it means this is a negative, and this is a positive, and a number in between. So that would be a 0 between positive and negative 5. And then if we are to switch these things up, then the value would only change by a negative. Trust me, it would be quite rare using these 3 in PHP. Then, just like all other object-oriented programming languages, PHP is a logical language. So if we are to say true and false, this value is means and. It's a Linux word. And then this in PHP means or. So these two things are different. Let me get laptop. Let me get an eraser. Let me try to get an eraser and we try to see something here. So what was I describing? I was looking at and or. You see, you've done flowcharts. Well, you start with the starting value and you say if this is so and so, then do this. We've seen this in JavaScript. And then you find things like and or, you find things like and then or and. You see, in programming and in computer science in general, these two things, if you've done discrete mathematics, are totally different. Or means if we have apples here and we have pencils here, and I tell you, go to the room and bring for me apples or pencils, it would mean you can either bring this or this, but not both. So you need to just decide which one you'd like to pick of the two. With and, when I say go and bring for me apples and pencils, then you have to come and bring this and this. So every time you use this and symbol, it would mean that it has to operate both. But every time you use this, it means it's either the first value or the next value. So if one fails, then it should be the other, but not both. So that is just logic, and that logic is something that you would study in discrete mathematics. Another logic that we have is not. That exclamation, I've already mentioned it here. This exclamation in programming means not. And then when you bring in and as a word, then it would mean that it means and, but at a lower precedence. And you should always avoid this because it's so loose that you'd always get a wrong answer. I should use and. So I didn't even mean to teach you and. Always use and with the double and symbol, and then or as this one, you would use this very commonly, and trust me, very commonly, starting with our very first class tomorrow. But we also have null coalescing in PHP, and this sort of came to replace is set checks. For example, you can say that team is, then you try to get team from the database, and then you add these double question marks, and then you say Uganda. What does this mean? It says try to get the team from the database, but if there is no team from the database, then give it Uganda. Now, prior to this, you would say, I'm setting this. It's set to be get team, and then if you don't get it, give me Uganda. But they introduced these double question marks to say, in case it's not there, are you trying to find it? Then do this. Another good example is that goals. If the goal has been scored by a player, so you get the player and then you attribute their number of goals. But if there is no goals that we to get, then attribute to them 0. It's a good try catch at a basic level, just in case nothing is found. So do not confuse these double quotation marks with the or symbol. This is null coercing in case the value is null, and this is logics. And then we also have what we call a null safe operator, which is now in PHP 8 moving forward. If you have a variable like country, and then you can say that the country is find a player. Do you have a player? And that player, if it must be got from a team, but do you have that team? If that team you found it, then you need a country. Do you have that country? Then you have a name. This is sort of confusing since it came out in version 8 of PHP, but it's also something very similar in JavaScript, whereby at any singular step, in case we do not have any value, we have something to catch. If it's not in player, then it should be in team. If it's not in team, it should be in country. If it's not in country, it should be in the name. But regardless, we need to find the country. And this is to just make sure that we are safe. You just add a question mark, a single one. Don't confuse it with the double. You add a single quotation mark, and then you tend this to the next null safe until you get the very first result one. I hope we are good with arithmetics, assignments, comparisons, logics, null coercing, and null safe operations. Now, I've earlier talked about flowcharts. I need a very nice flowchart. I need a mathematical one. Yes, we have this. It has loaded. Let's open this in a new tab. We have this image. We have this image. And this image is a very good example of a flowchart in mathematics. It starts by starting the program in math and then it inputs two variables, A and B. Then it says that now this is a condition, is A greater than B? So if the answer is true, then it says now C equals to A minus B. But if it's a false, then it should be the reverse, B minus A. But regardless, we have to come to the output C and then it ends. This is a very simple flow control that we can write in any programming language like JavaScript and PHP. Here we are able to see declaration of two variables A and B. So we can get to say that we have a variable A, which we want to give, let's say, yeah, let's give it 3. And then variable B, let's give it 4. So it's saying that if A is greater than B, what should you do? All right. If A is greater than B, then it's declaring C to be A minus B. And then it says return C. Else, if the reverse is true, then we should have C equal to the reverse. Now, we've just written that in, then we return. We've just written this entire flow, the mathematical flow, in PHP. And ideally, that's how it should be. I need to echo some things. Let us echo C. Just echo C. Let us first echo before we return. And let us also echo C here. So if we are to run this, it should give us a 1. Why did it give us a 1? A was greater than B. Now, if we were to change this and swap those values, and we added here a 4, and then we change this to a 3. This, when we are to rerun this, it would give us a 1. Because now B is greater than B, so we need to just, okay, it should always give us a 1. The entire goal is to, now the question would be, what if they are equal? Now, that's where now the logic needs to get further. If they're equal, we get a 0 because we've not catered for anything to do with what happens if, but if they're equal, it's taking it to a 4 minus 4, then giving us a 0. All right. Sometimes, in case there is anything that would go wrong, we can say try, and then we do everything we've seen here in our try. then we say catch, give us the error, and then in the error we can say echo the error message, and then return the error message and close. Now, what does try catch mean? It means that in case there is any singular error that is obviously outside of everything we've catered for in our if functions, then it should be tried and caught. So that's what it means. This is very key in case there are any errors that you've not accounted for in your if function. For example, if we change this to 3, if we change this to just 3, and we try to run this, it would say the error message is hash main. I mean, there is a mistake and this error has been caught. But if we change this and we say it in case of an error, just echo something like oopsie error. So if we are to run this and we don't want the client to see our errors, it should give us oopsie, there is an error. Line 12. Line 12. So what if we change this to 3? And then we try to run this. It would extract the 3 out of the string and then it operates it so that there is no error that proceeds. So these control structures, we've looked at if there is any other condition that you need to satisfy before you get to the else, then you get to use what we call else if. So in case there was anything here, there was a possibility of us saying else if this is this, then this, then this, then this, then close and do the else statement. So the else statement is that in case the reverse is, in case the signs changed, then add instead. Else, just subtract. Now, if you are to rerun this again, it would give us a 1. Let us try a possibility where A is less than B. Let us make this a 1. Now, if we make that a 1, the else if would come in, and to give us a 4, it would just add instead. And that is possibility number 2. We've looked at if, else if, and then we have if true, if false. These conditions are always numerous. I don't know whether I can get one that is more complicated mathematically that can be done in what? In program form. Looking at this one, we have so many conditions. Yeah, it starts with declaring the value of A, B, and C. So we want to find the formula ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0. So if A is 2 and B is 3 and C is 1, it would ask, is A 0? If it's 0, then is B also 0? If yes, if C is also 0. If it's yes, then, my friend, there must be a formula in which we just skip the values and then get the result. But if A is 0 and it's not true, then we need to first pass it in the formula of B and see where we get to find this and that. In case of such a structure, in programming, you need to draw this. It's called architecture. We looked at web architecture. You need to write down a full schematics of your own control structure so that you can know what you get to use. Either is it an if, is it, are you going to use else ifs anywhere, are you going to use is true. For example, you can say is if true, if false. For example, if we had a variable called status and we say that is live question mark live, then give it scheduled. That means that if it's live, then give it live. But if it's not live, then you say this game has been scheduled. That's using of the ternary. It's part of the flowchart. Then we talked about switch in JavaScript, where we said you get to give switch, and then after switching, you give the different cases in switch, under which if it's not given, then the else statement comes. So you can keep on switching from different possible scenarios that the flow needs to switch to, like it sounds switch. Case scenario 1, case scenario 2, case scenario 3. But instead of using switch in PHP, we can also use something like this. If we have a variable called event label and we attach it to match where we call event and then we get the event type, then we can say that for goals in our commentary, you should say goal. If there is a yellow card, then you mention that there is a yellow card. If there is a red card, then mention there is a red card. These are different types being attributed to what should be pasted on the other side. Instead of saying switch, then case scenario 1 is go, case scenario 2 is yellow card, case scenario 3 is red card, case scenario 4 is substitution, case scenario 6 is corner, and case scenario 6 is the default, which is outside of all those cases of the switch. Then you can do this and attribute directly, and that's a little bit better. We have loops in PHP. We have loops which could be recursive. You see, recursive means that if you went to Google and typed the word recursive, I think the one is recursion. These Google people are funny. They ask you, often they ask when you've misspelled something, did you mean this? So they ask you, did you mean recursion? And yeah, I meant recursion. When you ask somebody, they'll ask you again, did you mean recursion? Now, what is happening here is they are keeping you under a loop of doing this exact same thing until you break. And trust me, recursion is one of the most repetitive. This is one of the best things that Google has ever done on their algorithm that I love the most. So you may need a loop that keeps on running, and it can run recursively, and that's why we need loops in this language. For example, on a basic level, if you had events that has goals, this and this and this, we can use a for loop. Under a for loop, we say that for index 0, let us start with index 0. So if this index value is less than the count of the events, continue increasing it. And then you echo the index and then attach to it the event number, the event, and then give me the printout, PHP EOL as we've seen earlier. And then it will keep on starting with the index 0, then index 1, the index 2, the count of events, and it would say this is event 1, event 2, event 3, event 4, event 5, event 6, and so on and so forth. This is called a for loop. We also have a for each loop, as we shall see. For each loop, it works most with arrays. So if you have an array like this one, so if we say here, we say name, and then we attach name to Nasim, and then we say age, and then we attach your age, which is 19. Then we say course, and then we say web development. This is an array. It's called an associative array in PHP. So we use for each loops when we want to loop within a certain array. You see, sometimes when we can have an array that has so many other associative arrays inside of it. What do I mean with this? I can say that no, we shall get to that. We shall get to that when we talk about APIs. But for now, I give you an example of this. Name is Kadu. Patrick Kadu has 12 goals. Another name is Olunga, and Olunga has 9 goals. These are two arrays. They have the same structure. So we can say that for each players, so we have defined players as player. We are defining a specific, this is a key and this is a value. This is a key and this is a value. So we find that for each key as a value, echo the name and the record, and we'll print out that Kado has 12, Olunga has 9. So that is a loop that would break until it finishes every single object in the player's list or array. Then don't look at that alternative. Let us look at functions. Today we are looking at basics. So these basics are very key because we are going to continuously be using them at different points of this class. So when we look at functions, when you're defining a function in PHP, you say function, and then you define the function name, and then you open a bracket where you add the parameters of this function. And these parameters must be satisfied by that function. But in object-oriented PHP, we get to add a colon, and then we say the output should be a string, and then you continue with your entire function. So this is called type hinted function. It's specific on the data type of what you want to result to, and that's what we shall be working with mostly. And outside of this function, you get to echo or call the function to be output at any singular point. But we also have a nullable type function whereby you get to declare your own function and then define that function. And as soon as you give it parameters, you add a question mark in front of a specific data type that you might not know, and then you say ID. If you're to call this, it's null, and the type is completely null and undefined. We have union types which have more than one data type. For example, this function is called render. It says this function should be either a string or an array, and then we get to define this function. This would give us the output that is either a string or an array. That is called a union type. And then we have functions that have named arguments. For example, this function is called create event. And under create event, we've been able to define a string of type and the integer of minute and a string of player and a string of team. This way, we have each argument or each parameter being named. Um, that's another kind of a function. And then we have the default parameter functions. By default, this is render badge and has a string here, a string of color being primary. So everything has been given its default value. The color has been set to be the primary color, and the Boolean peel, we've set it to be false. So we have defaults already defined. So everything we need to do needs to refer to the default before it can be manipulated in that function. We also have variadic functions where it's variable, variadic. For example, this function is called log events. It has parameters, integer match ID, and a string that runs to events. So if we to void this and then we create maybe a for each loop inside this, it would run all the way to the very last event in this loop, and it's what it will consider in this very function. So those are the different functions that we have in PHP, and with that, these functions, we shall practically go through them in details. I've been a little fast with functions simply because I know for sure that functions are better understood practically. And in our next class, we shall start our object-oriented programming. We shall do some HTML and then we add back into it. Thank you very much for joining me for this class. Until that next class, adios.